My name is Vlad Magdalin. I'm the As You Settle In, please sit down. I'm one of the co-founders of Webflow, and I'm known for really, really bad dad jokes. And I'm actually going to leave out all of them this time, because last time people got hurt. And just move on to the content. But before I do that, why don't we recognize how freaking cool this conference is, right? And I literally mean it's cool. It's like freezing in here, right? That's a pretty blanket statement. By the way, I love the stage design here. Like, this thing is great. It tells you where the front is, tells you where the back is. And this, it looks really small from back there, but I'm 6'3". So it's like really deceiving. And it looks like the stage is kind of small, but once you're here, it's like, holy cow. But anyway, the important thing is, I'm a dad. That's the thing I'm most proud of. By the way, my daughter there is now a lot bigger, and that happened just over the course of 7 years. All right, so anyway, let's get to the real stuff. So today I want to talk about, and I didn't know whether to make this a question or not, but who will build the next 1 million products? And today, all of us probably work on some kind of product or website or solution or back-end thing, and it's something that impacts so many things in our lives. I mean, products like Airbnb probably got us here, or like Kayak found us a flight here. All these things affect our daily lives. So the question I want to talk about is, who will build the next generation of these? And to do that, I want to tell you one story about my brother, actually. His name is Sergey, and here he is with some llamas for some reason, because llamas are cool, I think. And a few years ago, he had an idea for a product, and he sent me this email. Actually, he sent it to a bunch of friends, where he had this concept of creating something like a Kickstarter, but for social causes. Almost like a GoFundMe, but for causes in the local area where he would get a movement of people excited about an idea to help somebody and raise funding and go actually make it happen. And he spent almost a year developing this concept, trying to find people excited about it, and even went so far as to design the entire product from start to finish. These are just several screens, but it had everything designed, all the user flows, all of how it was going to function. But the problem is, he didn't have a developer. He couldn't actually make it real. So I couldn't find a screenshot of Sergey really frustrated, so I found this stock photo of a designer wearing glasses, being mad, so you get that. And actually, the description of this was young bearded graphic designer, laptop, looking sad, worried, absolutely empty. And then I looked right at the bottom at the caption, and it says, young bearded graphic designer with a laptop, looking sad and worried, absolutely empty-handed, broke, in sheer bankruptcy, penniless, feeling poor and frustrated. Then I knew whoever wrote these has probably been a freelancer. Am I right? So Sergey wanted to build something for the web. And the web is now the medium of how we build most of our products. Who in this room is building something for the web that's connected on the web somehow? It's probably all of you. And the web was invented over, do the math, in 1989. We had a version of the internet, but the web as we know it today was invented in March 13th of 1989, where Tim Berners-Lee released the first website where there's a browser and you can actually share information across different points in the world. And then we took off. At first it was a toy. We made sites like this. Then we got really mature and made sites like this, where everything was really creative. Then today, we have some amazing things built on this medium. There's hundreds of millions of websites, actually over 1 billion websites, hundreds of millions are active. And we have this amazing, incredible medium. But the problem with the medium is that to create for it, to actually make something meaningful, you have to know code. You have to know how to write in a text editor to get something tangible and real out there. And we've had many different tools, like Dreamweaver. I don't know if that triggers any nightmares or anything like that. Although when I saw MX over there, the first thing that went to my head was Dreamweaver MX, and I got sad because I miss it. Honestly, it was good. Um, anyway, after Dreamweaver, we kind of got some of these like more mature web technology, like HTML and CSS, and later we got JavaScript, and then people sort of started to figure it out. We got books, and more creative people, designers, could actually pick up some of these technologies. And then things got kind of intense. We got more technologies. Then we got even more technologies. We got even more technologies. And all these things, sometimes just to make a simple website or to make a simple product. And then we started getting cheat sheets for the technologies, for HTML and CSS and JavaScript. And now, to do layouts on the web in products or websites, we have cheat sheets for something called Flexbox just to put like boxes next to each other. And these cheat sheets are so long that we have a cheat sheet cheat sheet. So a cheat sheet for the cheat sheet, in case you get overwhelmed by the cheat sheet. And another part of the problem is that the complexity of the web platform is just exploding. And now we have mobile, we have all these things we have to figure out as a developer, as a designer, as a product team in order to ship a product. So the complexity curve has just gone through the roof. You just have to figure out so much more in order to do what we do on the web or on mobile. You can sort of think about it as one way of delivering software. And we have now this Jamstack and all these frameworks to simplify things, but really what it's leading to is even more complexity where you need bigger and bigger teams in order to figure out how to build more and more complex products. And we're still working in this mode of writing code in one place, then going to the screen that we're actually designing or trying to implement and seeing, is that what I meant? So we're going like putting in the code and guess and checking, is that what we meant? And then you can extrapolate that to our overall like design and engineering and product process where designers say this is what we mean, and then it sort of goes to engineering and they sort of build it, and then it kind of goes back and forth and we figure out, is this the thing that I actually want to create? So behind everything is code. But code, if you look at all the people in the world, like just take all of humanity. Let's say there's 800 people in this room. For some reason, I thought there were going to be 400, so I got this whole slide wrong. Just multiply by 2. But in a room full of 400 people, or 800 people, there's only one person that knows how to code. If you take worldwide statistics of how many people actually have access, like real access to that kind of power. So out of this room, maybe 2 people, which is kind of depressing. So only 0.25% of the entire population of the world has access to the true power of creating for this incredible medium that we created. It's almost like saying, sure, everyone can read, everyone can consume books, but only 1 out of every 400 or 2 out of every 800 people can actually write a book or have access to creating something that will be read. And this is becoming, like the complexity of this is becoming such a problem that even industry veterans that have been doing this for years, if not decades, are being overwhelmed. Like people who have made this their professional career and not just learning it from scratch, they've been doing this for a long time. Brad Frost, who's like one of the inventors, actually the inventor of atomic design, which has led to like design systems, talks a lot about how even he feels completely overwhelmed by all the new technologies that are happening in the space of software creation and UI design. And Jen Simmons, who actually helped invent things like Flexbox and Grid and promote them, sees this trend just repeating over and over, where industry leaders, people who helped make this web creation a reality, are being outpaced by progress of all these technologies being created. Again, because code is at the core of it. But what we need, what humans like truly need, how we operate as people and how we've solved problems in the past, is that we need this to create, we need this direct connection to the thing that we're creating for, a direct connection to the medium. And this has been a pattern throughout humanity. Like when we're painting on caves, we're not like describing what to paint, we're just like directly touching the cave wall and painting. And when we're creating paintings, when we're playing a musical instrument, there's like this human, tactile, direct interaction with the instrument that we're using to create art or to create design or to create the final product. When we're writing something, writing a letter or a note or a novel, we have this direct connection. We don't guess and check when we're sketching a person. When we're creating pottery or something with our hands, it's right there. Like you push on it and it changes. And sure, you can mess up, but you can correct it, and you have like this immediate reaction from your medium. We have this in like movie design, and whenever you're creating something that's meant to be shown in a museum, all of that usually is created directly with our bare hands. And when we have, like, even our kids, when we're playing with Play-Doh, you have this, you want to make something, you make it. It can be messy, it can be rough around the edges, but it's so hard to make a mistake, unlike in code, where if you make a mistake and miss a semicolon or whatever, like the whole thing explodes. And we've started applying this principle of direct manipulation to a lot of different creative disciplines. And here you see like 2D animation and game design. In 3D animation or modeling, like this has long been a thing where we've moved past, working directly with vertices and NURBS or whatever, and we just have this power, movie effects, we're now like have entire movies where you can sometimes not tell whether a person is real or not. And that's because the direct manipulation tools are so good that allow artists to create these new worlds. And even in 3D space now, people are painting these entire environments that don't require this translation from one place to another. And even earlier, we saw that at Drift, there's like this new kind of direct manipulation-y approach where whenever you have a diagram for a workflow, you now have something that looks like it, like something that you would do with paper, you're mimicking in software. And there's so many of these examples in the industry that's outside of the software industry and outside of the product industry. We see it in 3D animation, where people directly create skeletons and move them around, and they pick up a hand, they move it, and that's it. They don't have to like go write some code to make that a reality. 3D modeling, cinematic grading artists, like they just make the changes they directly want to see. We are all familiar with Photoshop and Sketch and Figma, et cetera. Like illustrators, they don't mess around with the SVG code anymore. They're directly manipulating the medium or their creation. Level design, game design used to be something where you would have to describe in these long declarative files, the programming files of like what a level looks like or how it behaves. Now we have these rich authoring tools to create immersive new worlds that give a totally different experience. And particle effects as well. Like we no longer mess around with code. We just go directly and see, using these flow diagrams, we get to see the direct impact of what these rules, how they translate to reality. Photographers, of course, like I mentioned, we all use Photoshop. Print designers, InDesign, it used to be, in InDesign, it used to be you would do it on paper, and then it would go to a typesetter who would write the code to go to a printer. We no longer have to do that. We go into InDesign, we press a button, it goes to a PDF, and it goes live. Texture artists, video editors, visual effects artists, and then website and application designers have this, which is, I don't know, doesn't really make sense. For those familiar with CSS, I laid out this slide in CSS, that's why it's cut off. And as an industry, we're kind of like, okay, this is kind of how we do things. This is fine. We create more processes. We create more. We're kind of moving in the direction where we're starting to blur the lines between design and development. But for the most part, we're still assuming that the main way that we can create these things are through code. And that assumption, I think, is something that deserves to be challenged. Grace Hopper, actually one of the inventors, one of the early pioneers in computer science, she said, the most damaging phrase in language is, we've always done it this way. And that kind of assumption can really stifle our creativity and have us just avoid some potential solutions that might be right in front of us. Brett Victor also has a talk called Inventing on Principle, in which he makes this this statement that once you are kind of like deep inside of your practice, you sort of miss out the possibilities of what's possible if you don't use the same tools that are available to you now. So what can we do about this? So obviously, I said I work at Webflow, so we're trying to go in a direction that is giving more of this power to people who don't know how to code. But we're just one tiny player in a huge, huge movement that might not seem huge now, but it's about to become very huge that I just wanted to tell you about. And the whole concept behind the movement is how can we not rely on code in order to get the same exact output or product? And is it even possible? Is it possible to take this dual mode approach where we see the code and we go guess and check whether what the code that we wrote is what we actually meant, or the declaration that we made, it did actually create the product that we wanted to create? And or can we combine it into what graphic design has done, and tools like Illustrator and Figma and Sketch, where you no longer have to look at the PostScript code to see whether your logo looks right. You just make sure your logo looks right. But it's a much harder problem to do that with software design and product design than just graphic design. But we're starting to scratch the surface. For example, in Webflow, we're making direct manipulation tools to create entire websites and smaller applications. You can actually start to create database-driven entire products that have real-life data, and you design around that real data. You're not building mocks. You're not building something that is then presented to a developer to translate to code. You're directly manipulating the medium that you're creating for. And the product that you create, it's truly WYSIWYG. It's what you see is what you get. It's not something that's going to be translated. It's the real thing. It's like the actual medium that you're pushing for. There's a company called VoiceFlow that's doing the same thing for voice apps like Alexa and Google Home, et cetera, where you visually create a diagram. And almost anybody can do this, where you create logic and say, if I say this, then give me this choice. And you're visually saying, you're giving a different type of declaration than what you do in code. All this stuff is possible in code and traditionally done in code. But this new breed of tools is starting to create a way for people who don't know that language to achieve the same results. And over time, we're going to start to see a lot of these things coalesce, where you already saw in Drift, where like this kind of logic is declared visually instead of as like a single sort of hierarchy of decisions. And then DraftBit is another company that's doing kind of the same concept, but for mobile apps, where you can create almost any kind of mobile app and push it directly to the App Store without requiring a developer in the middle. And which is not a bad thing for developers. Like, there's so many more hard problems that need to be solved that are outside of like direct UI interface and application design, like algorithms, AI, ML. There's so many different problems that there's a huge shortage of developers. So developers don't have to worry about being, shut out of the picture or anything like that. But why does this matter? Why are tools like this starting to even attempt this? Because it's already possible to do to create all sorts of applications, and I mean, we're all doing it in this room. Well, I think it really matters because even though the internet is 30 years old, it's really just the very, very beginning. Right now, we're just in the very first, like Scott Cook says, we're in the very first minutes of the first day of the internet revolution. Like, maybe only 1%, if not 0.01% of all applications and products that are going to be built have been built so far. Maybe that's the case. While the internet, like the usage of people actually having access to the internet has skyrocketed. Right now it's a little over half of the world's population has access to it. That's just access to consuming the internet. We're not really looking at how people in different countries are actually creating for that medium. So far, right now, it's a very Western world-centric creation model for the internet, where most of the Western world is creating products and everybody else is consuming. And a big problem that is like central to that is when countries get on the internet, They might not speak English, but almost all of the content around learning how to code, getting access to learning HTML, CSS, product design, etc., is almost all of it is in English. So it's practically not accessible to emerging countries. And a lot of countries, especially where GDP is much lower than what we're used to in the first world, they're not even close to 50% penetration of the internet where they live. So we're just getting started into creating the types of products and solutions that are needed for where they live, the problems that they face, that might not be the same problems that we need to solve here. And this quote is really convicting. It says talent is equally distributed, opportunity is not. And that's kind of where we are right now with the internet, where there's so many talented people out there that want to build products, that want to create, that have the talent to do that. They just don't have the opportunity or access to all the resources needed to learn the tools to create for this medium. And again, it's only 0.25% of the world, which is, just think about it. It's such a small number, and I think it's going to remain a small number if our expectation is that people need to learn how to code to catch up. Because it's no longer as easy to learn how to code as it was 20 years ago. When I was getting started, it was honestly 2 orders of magnitude easier for me. All I had was HTML and CSS. And I could pick up one book and learn all of web development in one go. Today, a person getting started in, let's say, Russia or India, they just don't have that luxury. They have hundreds, if not thousands, of new technologies, no single source of truth to learn, and it's just not accessible. But what if we can take that 1 out of every 400 and make it accessible to 4 out of 400, and then maybe 40 out of 400? What kind of, that would be a pretty, even though it seems like it's still a smaller, it's a minority of the 400, right? But it's more than 10 times, it's more than 40 times as many people. Which means that more and more products can be created, more and more people that have ideas for solutions, for problems that face them or face the communities around them, or the problems that they're seeing in their world. That means they'll be able to create products for their own, for their world. And it's already happening. There's a company called News Story Charity. They created completely visually with Webflow this fundraising site that just to validate the idea of can we actually raise enough money for a few families to fund the development of their homes in Haiti after the big earthquake. And they did. They were able to prove it, and they built an entire company around it. And now they've built thousands of homes for people, and they've actually created a 3D printer to 3D print homes in developing countries, which is awesome. I don't know if any of you know Pablo Stanley, but he created this site, Latinx Who Design. He's not a developer. He wanted to make a directory, an application where you can search and find and what's the word? My Russian brain is blanking on the word. Nominate, there you go. Nominate people, designers who are underrepresented in design. And he just created it, launched it on Product Hunt. It's a product that is now serving a lot of people that otherwise wouldn't have been created if these tools didn't exist. Alyssa is a developer and designer who is helping people create platform games completely without code, just through Figma and some light integrations with a framework that she wrote. Now there's communities that are forming around this idea of helping creators that have ideas for products to use these no-code, visual development, low-code tools to sidestep the need to become a developer. Because a lot of people, even if they wanted to become a developer, it's really, really hard for them. Even if they found one who was a friend, usually that's a really tough sell to convince people to spend a chunk of their lives developing a product that they might not be passionate about. So now that there are these communities to learn and grow more of these no-code tools, and we're starting to see just like the initial traction of more and more of these products happening. And what's happening is that a lot of the development community, a lot of the real, the people doing the work today, like companies that have teams of designers, developers, researchers, etc. A lot of times the feedback that they get from people who are creating products with no-code tools, even though those products are valuable, live, providing value, sometimes you hear, oh, well, that's not real. That's not real software. Those aren't real products. Like, learn the real way. And I just want to encourage this entire community, in as much as you have the power to do that, encourage more people to believe that this is actually something that's possible and should become a reality, because it means that creative power will go into a lot more hands than what it is today. And we're kind of like, to zoom out a little bit, we're kind of in the age of the telegraph. So in the 1830s, the telegraph was invented, and over the next few decades became the primary way that we sent messages from point A to point B. And the way that happened was, you would, a normal person, like one of us, would go to a telegraph operator, or the post office, and write out a message, and then the telegraph operator would use Morse code to translate that message to another telegraph operator. It would go over the wire, and then translate that back into English or whatever language it was being sent in. And that was the way that we sort of assumed that communication is done, through these two translation layers. And there were actually lots of companies who were resigned to the fact that this is the way we're going to do things. Like, we're laying cables across the Atlantic. This was the way that we communicated. It was the de facto truth. And a lot of companies even wanted to create, like how we have personal computers. We're taking mainframes into the home. They wanted to create personal home telegraph systems where you could buy a telegraph for your house, so you don't have to go to the post office, but you'd also buy a book on Morse code and figure out, okay, now I can learn how to do Morse code. That way I don't have to worry about walking 3 blocks down the street. And that was the mental model. Like, this is the way that we communicate. But then we invented the phone. And obviously the phone is way more tactile. It's human. Like, we don't have to go through translation layer. We just dial a number, we pick up the phone. Well, you pick up the phone, then you dial the number. And it's a direct connection to your voice to another person's ear, or their voice to your ear. There's no need for this translation layer. And what if we could remove that translation layer from software design? What if we take all the complexity that is currently being expressed in code, and we start to express more and more of it, and make all that power, or at least more and more of that power, accessible to more people without having to need to code? So the question again is, who will build the next 1 million products? I really, really, really hope it's not just us. It's not just the 2 out of 800 people, or the people who have access to venture capital, or to teams, or to developers, or have the ability to create an actual company around the product that you want to build. I really hope that we can make it everyone. Thank you.
I think you kind of blew the minds of most people in the audience with just what access or what is available, right? So a question, how do you feel the transformation of our tools is going to affect the way we build products today?
I think it's only going to make it easier. What we have to do is take advantage of the power of computers. So before, we think about design systems, for example. We express a design system in Figma or Sketch or whatever, then we have to go make it real in React or Vue or whatever, jQuery, if you're not lucky. And then you get to some place where, is that the source of truth, is it not? If we can actually combine that into a single source of truth where designers are creating the design systems that are usable in production, then you've essentially made everyone's life easier. Developers can go import those components directly into the code base where needed, implement the really tough back-end bits, but everything that designers are essentially driving, they understand the problem of UI design, of like understanding how a user will flow through an experience, et cetera. If we move that more into the designer's hands, into the hands of product, then it just makes everyone's life easier. We just get to experimenting faster. We get to building things faster. So it won't just benefit people who don't have access to this stuff. It'll benefit everyone. Just like better graphic design tools benefited everyone. Just like 3D animation tools benefited everyone. So.
Cool. That leads really well into my next question. What impact will software like this have on the jobs of software engineers?
I think it will only create more software engineering jobs. Think of this as people were really, there were laws in the early last century where people wanted to outlaw cars because they would replace horses because horses left a lot of like dirt on the street that people had to pick up. So the people who had to pick up that dirt, whatever, you sit in, I don't know how conservative this crowd is. They were sort of like fighting for those jobs, but better jobs that were created. So if you think of software engineering, it's probably not a super fun software engineering job to like translate a Photoshop mock to HTML and CSS. In fact, like no developers want that job anymore. And it was like 10 years ago that people really used to fight for that job, but those same developers are doing a lot more interesting work right now. So imagine if 1 million products are created. A lot of those are gonna become hyper successful. Like an example, somebody that just has an idea for something like Airbnb or Product Hunt and validates it, makes it real, and then they really like, blow up and need to scale and hire developers. There's going to be so many more products and companies that need developers to do more complex work. We're just going to have, it's almost like YouTube. The movie industry used to be really worried about like, oh, if there's another distribution mechanism, then people won't need to come to us as people in the position of power of having a studio and all this equipment to make a movie. But no, movies didn't go anywhere. Like all the there's even more specialists in the movie industry, and it's booming. And yet we have millions, if not tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of new creators on YouTube, because now all they need is a phone or a camera, and that's their studio. And now they have a platform and a voice, et cetera. So I think it's only going to create a lot more software engineering jobs. And right now, there's already a projected shortage of over 1 million software engineering jobs over the next 10 years, even with this trend of no-code development tools. So jobs aren't going anywhere.
All your engineering friends are fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Except that one, you know who I mean.
Okay, so Adam asks, what is an entry point for the first 1%? In short, how do you see us getting from 0.25% to 1%?
It's a great question. I think it's already starting. Like the tools that I mentioned, like Webflow, Airtable, Zapier, VoiceFlow, et cetera, they're starting to see exponential growth. So we might not actually move the needle on how many people are learning how to code, because that, even with code.org and all these trying to move code literacy into earlier and earlier school curriculum, that number isn't changing that much, because the complexity is even higher. So complexity is growing higher than we're like able to teach people these coding concepts. But I think the number of people creating software is already starting to inflect, where I think 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to see maybe an order of magnitude more software created this way than today, and then another 10 times as many applications and apps just a year after that. So it's going to start growing a lot faster than it has been so far.
Cool. Scott asks, how do you envision the output of these products ensuring usability, accessibility, and localization?
That's the beautiful thing about it. You can actually bake in, because right now the problem with accessibility is that every engineer has to learn it and becomes an afterthought. Like, poll 100 engineering teams and see how much of their time they're actually spending on accessibility. And I bet you that number is probably under 5%. And I bet you that number is only over 5% for companies that are, afraid of being sued or something like that. Like, it's so hard to prioritize, even though it's the right thing for a lot of teams, just if you look at the numbers. But by creating products that put constraints around, if you're designing a component visually, and then you put in all the tools, like think about InDesign, for example. Like print designers used to have to know everything about Pantone colors, how printers worked, when gamut warnings, like gamuts were going to, like colors were going to bleed in undesired ways. They had to know all this stuff. And then it was baked into the tools. Like before you actually press publish, it tells you, hey, all these things are wrong. So this is what we can do by getting more people to create software declaratively. You actually have a lot more ability to make people fall into the pit of success and do the right thing by default. And that's just the power of computers. Like we can teach computers how to like build these systems. I mean, we already have this with like React, where we have like linting tools, and developers use some of these tools to ensure that like code is correct, et cetera. We can apply the same things to visually develop software, except we can actually do it to another degree where we build it into the visual workflow, where people know early on in the process, not as a last check, whether they're potentially making a mistake or making a design decision that is going to lead to something that's inaccessible. And that bleeds into localization and internationalization and a lot of different considerations when you're building software.
Last question, should designers code? Just kidding. Don't answer. Let's give Vlad another round of applause. Thank you.